There's another really interesting emerging trend of self-compassion being really linked with performance.
Dr. Amanda Ferguson is a leading organisational psychologist, author and keynote speaker. With a Master's and PhD in organisational psychology, Dr. Ferguson has worked with top global companies.
Every organisation should have a particular performance management framework. You cannot keep anyone if they don't want to stay in your organisation.
They want autonomy. They want to learn and grow and be able to make mistakes.
Doesn't mean you compromise the priorities of the organisation. Just means you rethink them and create a win-win.
Where staff have to be able to feel safe, to make a mistake, to call out.
Trusting others
Is about trusting ourselves.
Whoa.
And we're talking about the need for harmonious passion versus obsessive passion.
I don't know what that is.
I
Can
know.
you elaborate a little bit on that? Dr. Amanda Ferguson, welcome to the Martian Logic Podcast. We've been communicating over the last few weeks, and we're really honoured to have you on board to educate us about a couple of interesting topics that are, part of your career, but sort of new to us as a young organisation at Martian Logic, but also, the audience out there that could be managers, entrepreneurs, CEOs, but also young people thinking of going into HR or, choosing a career. So all of the above. So if you don't mind, explain to us what you've been doing, what you studied, what your titles are, your education, and in particular somehow go into what organisational psychology is, which is, I know that this is a big part of your career.
It's lovely to be here, Anwar. Thank you for inviting me. Organisational psychology is a specialty, or if you like, an extra endorsement and an extra registration that you can get if you do a master's in organisational psychology. So to be a psychologist, you still have to do 6 years of training, whether you do a master's or placement only. And I chose to do a master's with placement involved in organisational, or what's commonly known internationally as industrial organisational psychology. In Australia, the Australian Psychological Society calls it just simply organisational psychology.
Okay, never heard of industrial psychology.
Yeah, industrial organisational. And certainly in America, that's the term they use. So there's the industry side of the psychology, and there's the organisational side of the psychology of an organisational psychologist.
Did you say industrial organisational psychology?
Yes, it's a slash between the two. So that's it's internationally termed industrial / organisational.
So that you recognise the difference between those stakeholders, the industry and the organisation.
Correct. So if you were doing policy procedures in industry, you were sort of advising government, that would be much more in industry or industrial psychology. I do mostly organisational psychology, and hence the term in Australia works well for most of us, I think, in Australia, because we tend to work more within organisations rather than directly to the industry bodies, the bodies themselves. It's more political lobbying work. It's everything pertaining to the world of work. It's fascinating because you don't actually have to be in the organisation or consulting to the organisation to be doing organisational psychology.
So why don't CEOs like me study that?
I don't know.
Why isn't that course called organisational psychology for CEOs or for managers?
Well, many of the same subjects run across MBAs. So when I taught at Macquarie, I was teaching MBAs and organisational students. Yes.
Okay. So there is the answer to my question.
Exactly. Business psychology overlaps completely with organisational psychology. And so anything that a person, an individual is dealing with in their organisation is organisational psychology. So if they're being bullied, and they're seeing me in my private practice, I'm seeing them as a psychologist, a general mental health psychologist, as well as an org psych, and I can help them from both angles and both aspects. If I've got a CEO seeing me about staff recruiting, politics, a lot of high-level medicos don't know how to do politics in the hospital system. That's classic organisational psychology. I'm not even in the organisation at that point. Right to being in the organisation, really running workshops, seminars, major change processes, really focusing on surveying the staff, what the problems are, creating design processes, seminars, workshops, to team building. I was the first one to take a group of corporates over the Sydney Harbour Bridge on the bridge climb for team building for a corporate group, AMP. I think the Sydney Swans did it before me, and then I did. So it took AMP
Fantastic.
Senior managers across. Okay. I didn't go with them.
AMP, for someone who isn't from Australia, it's a major insurance company, big corporate.
Yeah. I had dinner with them at the end, but I didn't do the climb. Yeah. I wasn't brave enough. They were. To all kinds of anything really pertaining to the world of work. So career coaching, job design, recruitment, outplacement, anything. And it's a fascinating area.
And in recruitment, do you get people maybe hiring you to say, what are the kind of questions we should have if we want to hire people in this role?
Yes.
To be able to get the people that are suited or,
designing any of those questionnaires, going through the process of selection itself. Haven't done that for many, many years now, decades actually. But and fascinating questions that you get asked. I was asked to go into a real estate company the other day and to do a pep talk for an hour and a half on how to deal with difficult people in the workplace, because real estate agents are always dealing with difficult people.
And there must have been some
curly questions.
No, I mean, when you think about COVID and the working from home situation, that must have brought a whole series of issues that are new to this environment that probably the world hasn't dealt with before. An organisation might have used you to say, how do we best deal with those situations that are related to the working from home environment? Yeah?
Absolutely. We saw poor managers go through a nightmare where they had no training for remote management. Suddenly they were thrust into not just temporary remote management, ongoing. And so, we had some off-air chats about micromanagement that many of them fell into. In fact, some recent research, early COVID, showed 40% of them said they didn't know how, they weren't confident to manage remotely. And it was the common problem that they fell into micromanaging, really trying to help the worker by being so attentive. And the worker then feeling suffocated, the best will in the world, but it really backfired. And so there was a lot of confusion. There was a lot of breakdown of communication. There was a lot of chaos and strife. And then there were some gems that came out of that flexibility that workers were already demanding, and workers were already starting to do what we call job crafting, which is a fascinating concept as well, that it took off during COVID as well. It's where the worker, in an informal way, starts to craft or change or shape or mould their work. And it's got many different layers.
Their job description, for example.
Not so much the description.
When you say their work,
it's the way they do their work.
The way they execute their role.
Yeah. So there's a relational job crafting. For instance, if you want to get some information about your customer or your stakeholder, and you feel blocked by a certain person that you're meant to be talking to get that information, when you go around that person to someone else to get the right information, that's relational job crafting to get the right outcome. That a worker can pivot, if you like, and that was the word that came out a lot in COVID, and they pivot in their role. So it's not changing their job description, it's finding better, smarter, more interesting, more engaging ways of doing the job.
Taking into account technology changes, the working from home situation, all these environmental changes. We should probably be able to do our job this way is better or more efficient. Yeah, sure.
That's right.
Sure.
Even STEM workers, science, tech, education, and maths workers, a big cohort of women found that they were really pressured with work from home and trying to do domestic work as well. So they showed their home situation to their worker. They stopped trying to hide it. They declared it. They said these are the challenges. These are why we're working around school hours. They were so much more productive that they then required to continue the flexibility because they'd found ways of working, crafting around their job to make it work better. They got brilliant results. They were able to show why. And that was a great change that came through. And there were some wonderful changes in the way we do work, including, of course, the worker now wanting to be seen as a person before they're a worker. So remember the Great Resignation and the Great Rethink, where workers after COVID went, I need meaning in my job now. I need it for it to matter personally.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah,
that was such a wonderful outcome. And the worker actually gained more power in the workplace. I think there's been a backlash, of course, where they could demand hybrid working and they could prove they could work just as effectively. And they weren't putting up with the conditions that were toxic before. They want the big demand now is psychosocial safety, where they feel they have the right to be honest about their workplace to their employer. And again, that's the relationship. So organisational psychology boils down to the fit. So the person and fit, they're fit in the team, they're fit in the job, in the industry, in the organisation, in the career. It's all about that relationship and that fit that everything gets distilled down to in organisational psychology.
I definitely think it is once in a century adjustment that we've had, the COVID effect in terms of how do we view that relationship between employees and managers and the organisation they work for is once in a century change. You're absolutely right. And, it's for an organisation, you can go two ways. You can die because you don't adapt to it properly, or you can actually become a lot better, more resilient and more efficient if you're really smart and know how to deal with that.
That's right. Sorry to interrupt. Agile is what we're talking about now, that the agile organisations that did shift, that did really pivot and change and adapt are the ones that are thriving and becoming a learning organisation so that people are open to making mistakes, and that's part of learning. That's an agile, growing, developing organisation.
Yeah. I don't want to get stuck too much on that topic, but it's so interesting. Say before COVID, every manager was aware that, if you have good employees, as in smart, intelligent people, competitive people, sought after resources in your team, they will be contacted by some recruiters or by your competitors at some point in time. I mean, what do you do as a manager or as an immature manager or someone who isn't smart enough? I mean, what do you put a wall against them, over them and make sure no one can get to them? We know that was never going to work. They knew that was never going to work, and they were hiding behind the fact that, okay, people at work, and there was no probably even mobile phones before that, and then mobile phones in the last 20 years made it a bit more possible, but it's hard for someone to call this person while they're at work and whatever. So now they are at home. They have time to answer their personal phone if they want to. So really, you cannot keep anyone if they don't want to stay in your organization. It's never been that potent in your face as a manager. Yeah. Get your acts together. Make people want to work for you.
Yeah.
And I'm not for a second giving anybody a lecture. I'm not saying I'm a good manager or whatever. That's for someone else to judge me and stuff. I'm just saying for all of us, that is so clear right now. It doesn't mean you compromise on your own, what you believe that person should be doing. It doesn't mean you compromise the priorities of the organization. It just means you rethink them and create a win-win.
Absolutely.
And so interesting. This has never been a time that changes, in my opinion. I'll let you speak to that from the organizational vision point of view and approach. It's never been a change that potent and big in such a short amount of time.
It was coming. We've been talking about VUCA times for many decades since the...
about what times?
VUCA.
What is that?
VUCA is an acronym that stands for volatile, uncertain, challenging, ambiguous times. Right. Meaning our turbulent times of climate change, of pandemics, of war.
How do you adapt during such a change?
Yeah, the constant volatility and ambivalence and challenges that people are constantly facing now. That the rate of change, the pace of change just keeps accelerating. We've known that since the 90s. And this acronym came out of the American military. They coined the term after the Cold War. So it's been around since then, and we've been watching it. Organisational psychologists have been watching the challenging times of uncertainty building, and COVID was just a crescendo. But it's ongoing. Look at the world.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Okay, I see what you mean. Yeah, that makes sense.
So this is a once in a century, yes, and it's going to keep going. That's our prediction.
Sure. No. This is not going to go back.
No.
The whole thing of being able to work with your resources, creating a win-win for those resources and give them a reason to why they want to stay, and vice versa, is and be smart about that and be agile. It's never going back now.
No.
Point of no return. We've gone past it now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to your point of keeping staff, we know that nuanced management was the big corollary or reset from micromanaging. Nuanced management is very much treating the individual as an individual and working out what motivates them, what incentive they have for the workplace. Is there another opportunity over in another department where they have a genuine interest, and moving them or giving them some time in that team will help them to grow and develop, and it may encourage.
I'm big on that.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's an incredible intro into your world. Thank you. You've touched on more than 30, 40 keywords. Each of them can be 5 books, as a matter of fact, let alone one. So just summarize for us organizational psychology. What is an organization? As I said before we started, I see it as an ecosystem. Describe it as an ecosystem or a system. I don't want to use your own words, but what are the stakeholders? What makes up an organization? What are the different interests and how they need to be balanced?
It used to be quite hierarchical, but these days those smart organizations have become networks. So it's a network of individuals. That's how we're describing organizations now. From key stakeholders, share people at the top, to share owners, right down to the individual person who's working as a junior. It's a networked group of individuals.
Okay. Nevertheless, that's an interesting point. I'd love to dig into that in a minute, but just at high level, the stakeholders involved. You got employees. CEO is an employee, so let's include the CEO even. So that's the one that's typically viewed as a tree, and you're arguing it shouldn't be, which we'll come back to that. What are the other stakeholders? So let's say in a public company, you've got shareholders, could be from all over the world, the mums and dads and organizational, institutional investors, all of the above. So employees, shareholders represented by the board. So I guess maybe do you make the distinction when you think about it between the board and the shareholders?
Yeah, of course you do. You've got these tiers still.
Is it tiers that way as well?
Tiers in a sense, but we're encouraging organisations that the more they see it as a network rather than power, you're going to have more success. For instance, all the organisational change processes traditionally hit a wall when there was hierarchical powered tiers involved, very much the way you were just describing, as a barrier to change, where change was being forced on middle management, and middle management was forcing it onto juniors, let's say workers, and yet stakeholders and shareholders and CEOs and CFOs were not changing the way they would look at the culture of the organisation. So it becoming less. One of the key examples is to be an example as a leader. So if your CEO is burning out, not taking holidays, and yet telling all the staff that they should be doing that, they're not going to, because they see even the middle management, if they're not role modelling, taking time off in lieu.
Is the environment a stakeholder?
The environment? Well, why not?
Operating, depending on what the organisation does.
Oh, the industry,
in many ways,
yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Even us, you can argue the whole data centre thing, the electricity that we use,
the
environment that we have in here. Do we recycle our stuff? I don't think I've seen a recycling bin on our floor in our building anywhere. In North Sydney, everywhere you walk, you don't see 2 different bins. So let alone in our organisation, and let alone an industry, as you rightly said, that is directly impacting with the environment. So is the environment another fact that you're trying to balance when you look at the organisation, the shareholders, without the going into the details of, whether it's hierarchy or not? As I said, I totally agree with you about I don't like the whole hierarchy thing, but nevertheless, as elements of that ecosystem, you've got this group of shareholders that invested into an idea that want to make it a business. They invest money and they want to see a return from it. And they employ people to execute that model. But it operates within an environment, right?
Yeah.
Always.
Absolutely.
Always. It touches the environment in every single way, every single day, every single minute. Who else is involved? The clients, the people that purchase that product, clients, customers, whatever they might be, consumer. What's the most generic word to use here?
Yeah.
The people that pay for the product, let's call it, yeah? And maybe even someone else, the government where they operate, etc. So multiple stakeholders, right?
Mm.
So when you think about it like that, a CEO comes in and says, I want to make this operation. I'm using very generic words here, and maybe they don't exist in the real sort of science of it. You probably use your own words better. But if we look at my job as a CEO is to operate this organization, operate the team. So as a CEO, I've got my team, the employees, in a way that maximizes shareholder return.
Yeah.
Whilst at the moment, as we said, unless you're stupid, you have to say also creates that balance of make sure the employees are happy. And that means a lot. Such a broad word. For every employee, it's different, what makes them happy, etc. To create a reason why good, talented people want to join the company and why they want to stay. Yeah. And operate it in that way where you've got this balance. You're optimizing both environments. Is that how you see it? What am I missing at high level?
That's exactly it. You've got these relationships that you're managing, which is what really I'm saying organisational psychology boils down to. But organisations are managed relationships. That's the network of individuals and all the different relationships, even to the external relationship with not the customer, because that's a very direct relationship, but the garbage collectors are an external part of the environment that you operate in. It's not part of your organisation internally, but it's an external, not stakeholder, but contributor service that you rely on. And so you've got to take care of that relationship, plus your relationship with the board, plus the employees. Of course, you're managing your pivot of those different relationships. So I think you've got a hierarchy you can't get around in any organisation unless it's completely flat and there's no hierarchy. But in your organisation, there is hierarchy. You can't deny that. You still want to network as much as possible because now the research is showing that's the agile front runner that's most productive, where individuals, workers are seen as having a relationship with you, even if it's a bit remote, that they are a person, an entity that matters. And there's your nuanced management again, that's flexible and agile.
So we call it nuanced management as opposed to micromanagement. Interesting.
Yes, nuanced is big picture. Like, oh, how's your sick child? Oh, that's no good. Did you take some time off? Yeah, so you did some overtime.
Right. Is that what you're referring to?
Nuanced is very pivoting again, according to the worker who might be so motivated by income, by bringing money into the company, where another worker may be so motivated by developing software. And so you're playing to their strengths and you're helping them to find their niche and to keep moving forward in the organisation, given
Get to know them. And that's what those small nuanced conversations you're saying, to really build real trust and meaningful conversation.
That's right.
To get to know that person and what motivates them.
That's it. And that's where trust does get built, because you have to start with respect before you look at trust. Respect is baseline. So you're requiring a respectful relationship.
And you mention a respect here is because when you really show them that I do care about these small things in your life, you're saying that is respect?
That's respect. And then you're going to build on trust. And you want to see respect coming back, of course. Then trust can start to build, because you've then got a foundation that you can work with. And trust is very much a two-way street. You're sharing trust as adults. And I've got a podcast where I say trusting others is about trusting ourselves. But how can we?
Wrap my head. Trusting others is
about trusting ourselves.
Whoa.
Because you've got trust your own judgment.
I get it. I get it. I'm on an interesting journey right now. And so you have no idea how much I appreciate you being here, because myself, forget the audience. It's equally important for a lot of people in the audience, but for myself directly, I'm on a journey right now where we built this amazing product and incredible brands, Australian, American companies that use the product and happy with it. So not just clients, got advocates. So we got to that point in the letter, to the top, to the advocates. You've got 400 large clients that use it. The product is amazing, huge appetite for it, and we want to grow. And we've got the money and the cash to organically grow. And I felt that some changes needed to happen in the way we managed the company, because we were small, let's say under 25 people. You couldn't go wrong. Open communication. You can talk with everyone all day. You have time to connect with everyone if you had to.
Yeah.
You can help people in the trenches, jump in different trenches and help. But now if you really want to grow, go say from 35 to 70 people by Christmas, you've got to start to build some level of structure and management style. And that's where that trust and all that is gold for me to learn from you about that. I want to start to practice with those 7 leaders. But at least I've started on a journey. So I've been planning it. And then from as soon as we got back this year, we already were on our way. 7 leaders right now. I never, ever, ever talk directly to the people they manage. I give them that.
Yeah.
I make sure I don't undermine them with their employees.
Yep.
And it's a very, very good journey. I started to see the fruits, but I'm still a little scared because I don't know if I'm doing it right. It's a new thing to me. Right. So you have no idea how much helpful this is for me. So, brilliant point that we just discussed, this whole trust-based, because, I was talking to another HR person and I asked her, what's the opposite? Is there a word to describe the opposite of micromanagement? She said, I'm not really sure if there's a word, but we then started to talk about it and we came up with that word trust-based maybe. We didn't know. We just called it maybe that.
Oh, yeah. The literature shows that, definitely.
And I said to her, I don't really know, but I know one thing just from complete gut feel that I know was missing is you get to realize that you were like that parent. And the reason I'm using the word parent is such an interesting example because it means coming from a good place.
Yes.
My goodness, parent, that no one in the universe loves their child more than them, yeah? However, they are doing so much damage when they do the helicopter parenting, whereby they think they can oversee any mistakes before they happen and eliminate them. It's like, imagine they have this machine gun from a helicopter. Any obstacle, we're going to demolish it, take it out. So smooth sailing and just walking smoothly for their child, which is not good.
No,
they will never learn.
That's right.
To make the mistakes and get up again and do all that. So it's coming from a good place most of the time, at least was for me.
Yeah.
And yet, what really one day became so clear is, oh my God, it's okay if they make that mistake.
Yeah,
it's not the end of the world. Let them make it. And that was a thing for me about maybe 8 months ago. And that's when I started on that journey. I said, I need to build this.
Yeah.
And so if you can talk to me about this, that would be amazing. Build a little bit on that whole trust base, the anti-micromanaging. Because if as a CEO, I come into an organization and I want to really maximize as I said, create that balance between shareholder interest and the employee's interest, let's just start with a good style management. So what is that? And we can talk maybe then into, as part of that, you need to have some kind of gauging of how the performance is going, which we move into performance management. But what is that style of management, that whole trust base that you're talking about, or you call it nuanced base? Talk to me a bit more about that.
First of all, management styles differ according to individuals. So play to your strengths as a manager, because it doesn't work if you don't. So if you're a natural leader type manager.
What's the leader between a manager? What's the difference between a leader and a manager? Sorry.
Oh, good question. A manager needs to lead, but not only lead. They need to manage as well.
Operational stuff,
yes,
execution.
Yes, so you're becoming more and more a leader as you remove yourself from the staff and you're just managing the 7 managers. You're becoming more a leader and less hands-on, which is a big adjustment for you, obviously. And because you care so much, you're so passionate about work. That's why it's been a bit of a struggle for you as well. Trusting, it's interesting, in the micromanagement research, they're talking about trust, and they're saying that, well, I take a step back first. I know that micromanagement comes from insecurity, and COVID brought out all our insecurities. So why wouldn't you? The managers have been insecure about, how do I do this? I'm not trained for this. But trusting is giving the staff autonomy, is trusting that you employed them or your managers employed them. And so they've already made a decision that they can be trusted. They want autonomy. They want to learn and grow and be able to make mistakes. That's about learning and growing. And that's a growth organisation, a growing learning organisation that we now know is the most productive type of organisation. It ties in with psychosocial safety, which is now legislated in Australia, where staff have to be able to feel safe to make a mistake, to call out where they think a plan's been poorly scoped, where project management is falling out of the timing that was designed to be completed by.
Happens all the time.
Yeah, put their hands up, call things out, and own mistakes and own problem areas that they don't understand or they don't have education around or they need more training in.
You say feel safe to try things and make mistakes.
Yeah.
That's so powerful.
Yeah.
That's another level of what I was talking about.
That's it.
Give them room.
Yeah.
Yes, you've got to give them room, but they need to feel safe within that room. They can make the mistake and they can be, okay, look, I've stuffed up yesterday, I did a blah, blah, blah. This week, I really intend to get on top of it and come up with another plan. And I'm pretty confident I'm going to turn it around. I mean, wouldn't that be nice if the conversation gets to that level of transparency and confidence?
Yeah. And then you've got a much more engaged staff member. My PhD area was on engagement, work engagement, which is basically about loving and liking your work. So cognitively you're engaged, you really like it, but passionately you love it as well. And imagine.
And what are the key elements that you, from if you remember, key elements to that? Share with us 3 things.
This was back in 2004. Yeah. In 2004, the world experts
changed a lot.
Yeah, they all said everyone engages the same way. Now, I come from corporate. My first career was in the corporate world. It wasn't a psychologist to start with.
What was it?
I started out as a technical writer at Westpac. I got headhunted by Fujitsu, doubled my salary because I spoke Japanese. So basically I knew the difference between the way I engaged in my work as a corporate worker versus a clinician was completely different. That as a corporate worker, I was there for career, perks, money, opportunities, advancement. As a clinician, I'm there to help, make a difference, save lives. We engage completely differently in the worlds of clinical versus corporate.
I can see that.
Yeah.
I can see that.
So I stood up. I ran a research project through Royal North Shore Hospital, which is one of the main teaching hospitals in Sydney, and with a huge cohort of 500 corporate workers, and I found statistically significant differences between the way they engaged in their work.
Can you share the outcome, please?
So clinicians loved the fact that they were making a difference. Corporates loved the fact that they were selling more than the person next to them in sales. They were getting promoted. They were going to have a flashy holiday with a junket from the company. Completely different things, reasons why people love and like their work. Clinicians are interested in the clinical side of whatever their calling is, and they typically have a calling rather than a corporate person who typically is there and driven or engaged because of the outcomes they're getting, not so much that they feel called to do it from their heart. Although some, passions are like that, developing software would be like that for some developers. But the thing is that we all engage differently, and knowing, and this is part getting back to management, knowing why people love their work.
Got it. Interesting. Okay. So, the opposite of micromanagement. What else can we talk about? What are some things that you've learned? Something you can share with us about that style of men? What really makes it work? Perhaps some tips about what makes it work practically. Someone like myself who's starting now, who are practicing that. What are some tips, key things that you maybe make sure I'm aware of?
The research is now showing that workers are going to do that job crafting I mentioned earlier, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
Increasingly, they want to own their job, turn it and make it work the way they can see, engages them, gives them more of a sense of meaning, gets the job done better and faster. They want to have that incentive, that autonomy, that ownership over it increasingly, because now, since COVID in particular, they want to be individuals and they want meaning from not just their rest of their life, personal life, but their work life, and they want it to take them somewhere. They don't want to just stay in a job and not grow. So talking openly in your weekly or your fortnightly meetings with your staff about what are they doing to own the job and make it for themselves, and how are they modifying it and evolving with it, and the job's evolving. And, some great examples of that could be that we used to do weekly reports, but we're finding we only need to do them fortnightly. Let's change that. We've discovered that saves us time, and we're all then meeting our targets better.
I'm big on. I always used to say 3 things. If you get right, if I go back to how to attract and keep talented people, I bring it down back to 3 things. I'd love your feedback on that. First one I always talk about is to have a seat for them to feel that their opinion is heard, able to criticize what's a better way to do things and best way to do things and stuff like that. What could the company be doing differently and better? And that's across the board, not just pertaining to, this whole thing about stick to your lane. That's not your department. That's not your thing. No. Across the board, they could be criticizing marketing, and they are as a developer, for example. Yeah. That's number 1. Number 2 is to be fairly remunerated. It doesn't have to be competitive. It doesn't have to be more. If you give them the other 2, fairly would be enough to keep them. Yeah. So they are, their opinion is heard, respected. I call that having a seat at the table, remunerated fairly.
Yep.
And I forgot the last one.
Wouldn't it be growing and developing?
Thank you. The learning aspects. So they remain competitive. Absolutely. The learning. Thank you. You're a legend. Yeah.
And for that, we know that people are more motivated, they perform better, they are growing and learning if their goals within the workplace are really ambitious. So you want them to feel like, whoa, this is a stretch. Well, the work I do, I'm stretching, and I've got to stretch again. Every now and then is another big stretch.
Yes.
That's a big incentive to stick to what you're doing in life.
Correct me on that. Psychologically, I think we all know about the brain and the mind and the real person and whatever, but I think psychologically, even if they don't have to discuss that with their partner or someone or manager or brother or whoever, psychologically they know when they are working on cutting edge, they're going to be more competitive. They feel more secure. Just psychologically, it just connects without even it's unspoken.
Yeah, I've got a phrase for that. Job security comes from being employable.
Yes.
And so being on that cutting edge, being competitive keeps you employable.
100%.
That's your job security.
100%. So even without being discussed, psychologically, it's all connected and they know it. So they love to be pushed. They love to be working on the edge and paid. And this is an interesting thing. I think I'd love your feedback on that, because if you're a smart company, you'll realize that if you do those 2, which is the learning and the opinion seat at the table, if you do these right, you don't have to overpay people to keep them. You end up really investing in sustainable, those, let's call them 1 and 2, if we keep the REM as a third one, remuneration, A. You do 1 and 2, that means if you invest a bit more money into them, you will have a sustainable strategy, but also you're not paying more because you're not going to have to overpay people to keep them.
Because you want them to be there for the right reason.
That's right, as well, sustainable.
Yes, their passion, their engagement, they love and liking their work.
This is such an interesting topic. You and me, probably we going to do this again in about 6 months, and I want to talk the whole thing, 3 hours just about this. I love that. How do you recruit and retain talented people?
Yeah, well, you want to find out why they want the job and does it fit with what the job is. So it's all fit again. Do they fit with the team? Are they fitting with the culture? What are they bringing in? What are they getting out of it? You know, when you look at lateral moves, and I did that to get into psychology, I moved out of corporate into the Cancer Council. And I thought, they're never going to want me. They wanted all my corporate skills and way of thinking, and I wanted health. I wanted to get a foot into health. So
isn't that interesting?
Yeah. So why would I be so engaged? Because I had wanted to study psychology. That's why I wanted to get out of corporate. They really wanted the benefit of the corporate world. So you're always looking at fit, and fit is why people don't need to be overpaid if they're the right fit and they're there for the right reason. They're not there just for the pay. They're getting so much else, as you said, out of it that is more likely to keep them and not let them be poached, because that relationship, the longer they're building it, the less they're going to want to lose it if it's continuing to grow for them and the organisation, and they can see that both relationships, both sides of the relationship is growing.
And, you know, it's so interesting, Dr. Amanda, so interesting, because all those 3 points you've been talking about, they're so connected.
Yeah.
So the job crafting, listen to people, having that nuanced conversation to get to understand them so they can share with you what matters to them. And this point about how do we keep an employee, and they're all connected. Yeah. They're all interconnected.
They all work together, and they're all very soundly researched in the organisational psychology.
And you know, it doesn't sound that complicated. Freaking listen to people.
Make them safe enough to tell us the truth. You know, that's a win-win.
It's not that bad.
No.
It's not rocket science. Everything else will work itself out, right? If you can be this genuine person that you can gain the trust of someone to tell you really what matters for them in life and how they can potentially make that job work better for you and for them.
Yeah. And to that point, we know that if leaders admit to their mistakes, you know, like, I should have taken some extra time off because I think I'm on the burnout slope. I'm going to take some time off, guys. I've admitted, you know, that I didn't look after myself really well. I'm going to do it now, and I'm going to model that for you. Then if we see the leader or the manager admitting their own mistakes, I miscalculated that, guys, we're much more likely to feel safe to actually admit our own mistakes because the leader or the manager is doing that.
Yeah, I get people in an interview and I say to them almost from a beginning, you know, from 15% in. So what are your ambitions? What do you want to do in life? Do you want to get married? Do you want to buy a house? Well, what's the next 3 years? What are the goals that you want to do personally? And what would it mean for that job to support you to do? Let's talk about that in the terms of holistic thing for you.
Yeah.
And they go, oh, no one asked me that question before. They feel that it's so refreshing.
Yes.
Go, what? How is it that people don't ask that question?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Crazy. I mean, they're going to increasingly probably ask that question because of this. Everyone's being trained in management now that you've got to actually treat the staff person or the worker, the manager, as an individual, or they're not going to be interested in staying if you don't care about their individuality. Because that is a big shift that happened from COVID, and that's why people resigned in droves.
Individuality.
Yeah.
And you described it. You've had another word for it, but it's the same thing. What was the other word that you described?
So individuality, nuanced, and the safety aspect of being safe to be you. Yeah. You know, at admitting you've got a child sick at home and you want the flexibility. You know, being brave and being safe enough to be able to say that these days, because you know a lot of people wouldn't say it. They'd try and duck and weave and hide it and get someone else to. And they'd be stressed at work because they know the child's actually really preferring the parent to be home with them. But yeah.
I've got this gift where I don't know why and how I can estimate time really well because I've never worn a watch ever. So I've always relied on my brain trying to work out, connect the dots to go, it's been about 3 hours or something. Like, oh, what time is it? We're at the beach. We've been there for a bunch of hours. I say, 4 p.m. You know, so I can imagine we've been talking for about now 30 minutes to 45 minutes. So I would love to talk to you about this for the next 5 hours, but just in the interest of still potentially, if you're okay with that, to talk a little bit about performance management. And, it's very, very much in terms of my own curiosity. So I'm really grateful, as I said, for this podcast, because I'm learning from it. So the things that I'm learning from, where you can add direct value to me, is understanding. We touched, enough on the organization as an ecosystem, and as a CEO, you're trying to balance the interests of the shareholders and the employees, and potentially the environments and the clients. So what is the history of performance management? When did it start in the Western world to become a word and started to, maybe I'm going to use broadly the word of a framework, so people like yourself and other professionals out there started to coin the word of, I want to create for you some kind of performance management framework, using that word very loosely, whatever the other words you might use for that to describe that, for your organization. Mr. CEO, your CEO, Anwar at Martian Logic, sat down with you, understood what you're trying to do and what your organization does. I've interviewed some of your people. I'm ready to talk to you about what I think is the right performance management framework for you. When did this thing become a thing in the Western world? In the 50s, in the 20s, in the 80s? Give us some idea, roughly.
There's so many different aspects to performance that fed into it. So motivation was started by Vroom, and Vroom is a famous researcher back in I think it may even have been the 40s, but certainly by the 60s. Talked about motivation, and that
how do you motivate your employees?
How you motivate your employees, yes, how they're motivated, and that if they're motivated, they're going to perform better. Then we added to that Locke and Latham, and Locke really started in the 60s, and then the 90s they really took off. Locke and Latham are famous, probably the most famous organisational psychologist, researchers who added to it.
Locke and Latham,
yes,
two last names?
Two last names.
They published some papers together.
Many books, many papers.
Books together. Okay.
World-renowned. Everyone quotes them.
I'm going to write down Locke and Latham.
Yes. I've got their names written here. No, not theirs, but I can give you their Christian names, but you won't have trouble Googling and finding them. Edward Locke and Graham Latham, I think it is.
So that's around the 60s?
Yes, from the 60s through the 90s. Recently published a fabulous book in 2013, all about goal setting and performance and motivation and all that world. And again, they're all interrelated concepts. Performance on its own is not seen as a single well, it is a single construct, but it's so related.
So the first key word in the history of the industrial world, you're saying, was motivation. How do we motivate employees? Clearly knowing that we get the best or the most out of people when they're motivated. That's how it started, right?
Yes, but then the Locke and Latham research added to that goal setting, and that we all have a drive. They even talk about nature has this drive to growth. You see a plant that's growing, and individuals have the same need to grow, and that ambitious goal achievement, so goal setting, adds to your performance. So that's a whole field of research where you want a very challenging goal as part of, and that will actually help you be motivated.
This is related to that learning thing we talked about, the being employable, etc.
Yes, yeah. So the challenging goal adds extra motivation to someone who's already hopefully motivated, who's now really keen. And then we're talking, and there's so many different concepts that relate to performance, then we're talking about the need for harmonious passion versus obsessive passion.
I don't know what that is.
I know.
Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
So if I'm trying to prepare for today's podcast and I'm getting obsessive about the need to get through all my notes and have a look at, then I'm going to burn out.
Sure.
Whereas if I'm in harmony and it's flowing, the state of flow that we all talk about, if I'm in a state of flow, it's much more likely to be successful. Even an elite athlete needs to be in a state of flow. A violinist, a concert violinist, is trained and then just get on and just wing it.
Are you trying to say so the company, a good manager and company, will create that right environment for the employee to be in that state of harmony as opposed to
but still wanting to be in an ambitious goal-setting.
What did you call it? Harmonious
versus obsessive passion.
Harmonious passion.
Yeah.
In pursuit of your role, of your duties.
And then you've got the world of elite athletes, and you talk about performance there, and you've got conscious training, and you've got subconscious, unconscious training.
Oh, please,
the performance.
A few words about that. What's that?
Elite athletes, long distance or even short distance runners are trained. The finish line is not the line because they slow down. They see the finish line coming up. Workers do the same thing. End of a big project's coming up. That's not the end goal. We're then going to do this. Come on, keep going. So there's all of this understanding of the psychology of performance at elite level that we borrow from the elite athletes. Or I do as a hypnotherapist. When I've got performance issues, someone's trying to perform better at their workplace, I'm going to do hypnosis and let them see themselves perform and achieve that goal. And they've done it, that they think there's no way I can do that. My manager thinks I can do it. There's no way I think I can pull off that sale with that big client. And then when they see themselves doing it, they believe it. So again, we're borrowing from elite athletes, understanding and research on performance there.
A lot of history.
Performance is a massive,
massive. Many contributions into it.
Many angles into it.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. So why should every company have a performance management framework? Is that the word you use, framework? Because I'm taking the technology out. I don't want to talk about system and stuff like that. It would be even unfair because we do provide performance management software. I want to make it way above that, abstract, the science of it, the psychology of it. So that's why I'm using the word framework, meaning you could use an Excel spreadsheet, a bunch of Word documents and PDFs, and you can create the framework, yeah? So that's why I'm not talking software and features. So if we use that word as a framework, what is that framework that's going to work for our company? Or more so for the developers versus the sales team, yeah? What kind of questions and how frequent and the style of them, and should we have goal setting part of it? That's what I'm referring to a framework,
Look, so many different models that I can think of.
Sure.
Look at the most basic model where you have your framework is you have your weekly meetings with your manager and you get feedback and your performance is being assessed and you're being given feedback about how you're performing and performed that week. You're talking about how you feel you performed that week, what goals you kicked, what you didn't kick, planning for the future week or whether it's a month or whatever it is. That's your most basic framework of performance management. You've got your reviews, annual reviews or 6-monthly review. You get a performance framework when you start as a probationary period in a company often. And so you've got performance criteria you've got to meet. So many different ways and, you've got a very sophisticated developed model and data software. To hands-on. We need performance management. People need feedback to know how they're. So
you've answered my question. Yeah. Every organisation should have a particular performance management framework.
Absolutely.
You definitely recommend that you believe in it. Okay.
People need feedback. They need to know. You mentioned earlier, and people will judge me. We know that other people judging us as workers are far more accurate than we are ourselves, not just as workers or employees, but in anything in life. Self-perception is not nearly as accurate as others' perception of us. So when your manager and your team reflects back, that was great. You sounded great when you did that performance. It's like, okay, thanks. Good to know. Yeah. I was shaking, but okay.
Yeah.
So there's performance management.
If I tell you, you're not going to believe it. I've been, without any knowledge, just my own research and gut feel about our business, I'm recommending we're going to start now performance measure as part of that transformation. And I'm recommending we only worry about the weekly catch-up. And you just said the weekly thing. So it's an amazing coincidence and validation for me. So why don't we, if that's okay by you, zoom on that a little bit, especially in the context of looking at that framework of what you're capturing, what is it in that weekly catch-up that you want to capture and maybe really rate, and this whole goal setting, how does it go into that? Can I share with you an example? Just so you can believe me that this is what I'm working on right now, just in case you thought I'm bullshitting. Okay. So I'm recommending to the leaders, I'm still developing that with them, and probably we'll go live with it in a few weeks' time. I'm saying, I want you to do a weekly catch up with your team, but I want it to be 7 minutes with each max. So the system will send them, say, 3 days leading to, I want you to catch up with them on Friday afternoon, end of the week, let's say, 7 minutes each. So on average, people don't have more than 5 people directly report to. So that's plenty of time. Total of an hour you're spending every week. That's great. And I want you to capture 3 things only. How do you feel you went with your commitment, meaning hours, actually hardcore, like measurable hours that you put in? Did you do 38 hours as per the contract? Did you do 45? Did you do 25? Yeah. So you rate it based on that. Number 2, the focus during the time that you were working, were you distracted? And for sometimes life happens. There's a good reason. My dog was sick. The poor thing, he was scratching himself because he gets this allergy a few times a year, and they start to scratch themselves, don't realize, and it turns into real wounds. Sad, and it breaks your heart, you know. So I was very distracted on Monday and Tuesday of last week. Very, very distracted. And so, and I didn't come physically to the office, worked from home, but hardly worked, probably worked for 3 hours. So I said to the guys, it could well be because you're the direct manager, you know what's happening in their life. You're speaking with them 5 times a day. Yeah. So you would know if the dog is sick, etc. And you know what? If you feel that this person would try everything they can to make up for that, I would give them 5 out of 5 because life happens. We're this kind of company. We're not saying, but it's all about, meaning you take that life into account. Life happens, always going to happen. The day gets sick, the daughter gets sick, the person is not feeling great, mental illness, etc. We all suffer from things. So that life happens, but as long as it makes sense. So how many hours you actually tried putting in, what was the level of focus? And the final one, what was your completion rate? So for this week, you were supposed to do A, B, C, D. Did you do A, B, C, and D? How much? That's all I want you to capture, because in my mind, I was trying to work it out after a big debate. This came out of a big debate all day with one of the team leaders and developers and the head of marketing. And I said, that what's interesting about this is if this person had a good commitment and top level focus, there should be no reason why they can't get the last question. The completion rate should be 10 out of 10. Otherwise, you know what? The bar was set too high by the manager failed them, or they're not the right people. So therefore that drives proper debate. It has to make sense. But there's something going wrong here, And then after that, based on the goal setting thing that came out of client discussions, we've been talking to our clients leading to the launch of the product for months and months and months. And everybody talked about goal setting. What the hell is even that? I read about it. It sort of makes sense, but I never really felt it because I've never been part of a company where they did formal, performance reviews, nor we had the product before, and it's all new to me. And this time it made perfect sense. Why? I said, okay, interesting. One thing that we were suffering from, some of our leaders, they're really good people, but they can easily be distracted helping people without letting their own managers know. So they end up, Friday comes in, and they've achieved 60% of what they were supposed to achieve. And I'm going, what? Why? Oh, I spent 15 hours helping, blah. I go, what? And I didn't know about this. And Jim didn't know about that. And, So I said, okay, so if this is the case, then because of those 3 questions, this will emerge and we know what the reason was. So yes, I did put in 45 hours, as a matter of fact, not just 38, but because I was helping someone else, that is why. That means the focus was poor. You weren't focused on the right things, right? So then how are you going to do things better? How are you going to fix that? I want you to set your own goals about what is it you think you're going to do next week to turn this around. Well, I'm going to learn how to be more assertive with my colleagues about, I'm really sorry, I'm under a tight deadline for Anwar, for whoever your manager is. So I'm really sorry. Maybe we can talk about this in a couple of weeks' time, or maybe after hours, maybe on the weekends we can catch up. But you just cannot make that an issue why you can't complete your rates unless it's brought into management, factored in, and time allocated to it. So that all made sense to me. I know you might be laughing, thinking this is all common sense, but to me, I genuinely think this is the first time I felt it. That's the whole goal setting. Is that how you see it, the goal setting? The employee sets the goals about how they're going to improve on their performance based on a review, after a review?
After review, they could, because you're already doing it with them. So you want to help the employees set their goals because it needs to match the organisation's work with the organisation's goals. And you may know more about that than they do. Goal setting is very well defined, and it's the big offering from organisational psychology, that goal setting the way we know it works. And you have done it because it's specific, realistic, and timed. And then if you add ambitious goal setting, it's really challenging.
Okay.
And when you said maybe the goal was too high, the bar was too high set by the manager, then maybe the person didn't have their own focus enough and focus in the ways I was just saying about how to achieve it rather than how they might fail. And we talk about that as learning orientation to the goal, whereas people who have a performance orientation.
Mr. Learning orientation?
Learning
I'm
orientation.
Sorry, I don't know what that is.
I'm going to learn how to achieve that goal. Or if I've got a performance focus, people are watching me. How am I performing? I'm caring more about how I'm performing than I'm learning to get to that goal.
Wow, okay.
Performance orientation is no good. Imagine the violinist or the elite athlete caring what other people are watching. Good. It's not going to work. No. Takes the energy away, just like fear does. Fear, I'm not going to achieve that goal. That's not going to work. Yeah. I've got to be able to make mistakes, say what I don't know as part of learning to get to that goal. If that employee had reached out to their manager and said, I'm really stumped on something that is stopping me from achieving that goal this week, you know, or someone to help them, they're much more likely to succeed. So we know learning orientation. So yeah, you did the goal setting specific, realistic, timed, so you're ticking it off. And again, if it's ambitious goal setting, it's extra challenging. And they don't fail because they were too challenging. They fail because they weren't planned and designed properly. So most ambitious goals fail because they weren't planned properly and they needed rescoping. And so being able to help people to say, look, you need to rescope that. If it turns out it wasn't planned properly, we know you can do it, but maybe we need to do that.
Okay. Let's just go to another layer of the onion here. See if I can learn from it. If I can learn from it, the audience will learn from it. I think this is the best way to do it. So I'm going to be very specific here. You can help me, you've helped the audience. So this weekly catch-up that I genuinely believe in, and I don't think it should go more than 10 minutes, becomes a chore. It becomes something that people hate and resent, and also not practical. A manager with 5 people is going to spend 3-4 hours just on performance manager week. It's just not going to be sustainable. No, it needs to be quick. So you've got to design it to make sure it does get completed within 7 minutes. Otherwise, you fail them.
Yeah.
So this weekly catch-up, if we focus the conversation within this context, the weekly catch-up, this goal-setting thing, is it possible? And I'm sure the answer is yes. And if you can just help me maybe with an example, though I can't see it, but possible that the goal setting is part of the initial. So when you're having that weekly catch up, it's a series, right? You want to provide some context to it. So we're going to run this series for the next 3 months, for this quarter. And we're going to use this kind of format, guys, and we're going to see how we go. We'll review at the end of the quarter and we'll see what the next quarter, how we run these weekly catch-ups. But we certainly, as a company, you're saying to the employees, we believe that weekly catch-up is the right amount of time to provide that feedback and that adjustment before this person goes on too far on that tangent. It becomes too hard to come back. So we feel the weekly catch-up is something in our business. We want to make it work. We're going to fine-tune it. Let's run a quarter at a time. So in this quarter, can you say these are what we're going to measure, but also these are the goals for every person? Because that becomes very personable. And that's why I'm thinking that goal setting should be done. So in that first meeting is when the first goals are set. You have the meeting, you look at roughly what went on in that week, how the performance went, and we look at, therefore, what are the areas of improvements because of that? And then we say, okay, therefore, what goals do you want to set? Or is there another type of goals that I'm missing here? Maybe this is a category of goal setting. What am I missing here? Because this whole goal setting for me, I'm struggling to really understand it.
So as part of a long goal process, which is what employment really is, yes, you have projects as part of that, and within the employment term, you've got projects as specific goals.
Let's take an example. A developer that is at the moment hired to be a front-end developer and a junior front-end developer. They aspire, their motivation, part of getting to know what motivates them, where they want to be, they want to be a full-stack developer. They want to learn how to design databases, design indices and search technologies and all that, as well as solid in Java, that mid-tier, that what we call back-end developer versus just the front end. That's what they aspire to be. So over a year, 2, 3, that's where they want to see. They want to join the company to do the best they can for the company, but to grow into that kind of role. So you incorporate in their performance management that ultimate goal or elements of that. Is that what you're saying?
Well, yes, as part of your long goal, even if you had a Gantt path analysis where you had the different things they're going to have to do to achieve that end goal, there are short-term goals along the way, and they want feedback and they want recognition, achievements, and to acknowledge when each milestone's hit, which is a goal. So yes, you could plot that longitudinally, which is what we'd say in research, that this is going to happen over a 2-year time frame or a year time frame, and that they can see the end goal, and that as they achieve these mini goals, they're on their way to achieving them.
So is it therefore, if we stay with this example, the scenario of the developer and that 2-year journey, let's use that word, 2 years, let's say. So is the weekly catch-up going to cut it, or do we need to introduce something else? Or can we just work with the weekly catch-up?
You'll find out at the weekly catch-up. I think that is going to be a natural, if not conscious thing you add to it, that do we need to take this further? Has this weekly catch-up been enough? If
to introduce to in the sense, if you can please educate me about the weekly catch-up, in the sense, is it going to be enough from the point of view of being able to show the progress towards the goals?
Yes. Like if you see a person, to your earlier example, has lost the focus and seems to understand it, seems to want to correct it, says that's their intention for the next week, you get to the next weekly catch-up and they haven't, there's a bigger discussion needed.
So should we, for example, in that weekly catch-up, we keep that section because the platform allows you to have that so-called topic, and that we have that topic with those 3 questions. You thought this is a good idea and I love it. We keep it there. Maybe we add another section pertaining to long-term goals, which is for every person is different. And you track that, also make it very straightforward, 2 or 3 things in it, takes a couple of minutes. And you keep that sort of weekly goal setting about what am I going to do better next week also. So maybe there's 3 elements to it. The long-term goals that you want to sort of track, and those sort of ongoing operational weekly goals, and that high-level picture about where you're at, where your performance is at. And hopefully, because that section, that first one is the same, we're able to track how you're changing over time, how your performance is improving. Is there any seasonal things that are going on? What's patterns and all that? So that's what I love about them being generic like that. You can also compare it across different divisions, different people, because it's the same and it's rateable. So it's quite meaningful mathematically speaking, and you can just see the changes of that. But maybe we complement it, I'm thinking, with another section pertaining to the long-term goals.
And if this is, I think the word you used was series you're going to roll out for, say, a quarter, maybe you trial, unless this is too complicated, a little bit more realistic aspect to this. Because remember, goal setting's got to be realistic. That maybe it's more realistic to add the component of what's happening with your long-term goals and how how you view it at the moment, and are you feeling you're working towards that? That's done monthly, maybe, rather than
You
every
run
week.
a separate series. So you've got the weekly and then the monthly.
Yeah, or it's tacked on every month. But because probably weekly for your long-term goals is probably not realistic.
Yes, not when it's 2 years, no.
It's too micromanaging.
Yeah, because even when you think about over 2 years monthly, there's 24 touch points. That's plenty. When you look at a plot over 2 years, 24 is enough. Yeah, okay.
For more junior staff, they'd love that. For more senior staff, they'd probably go, again.
Yeah, so you've got the weekly catch-up and the monthly catch-up. 2 different series running in parallel.
Yeah. Or 3 monthly catch-up or whatever. Realistic. It's all about realistic.
And those can have more oxygen in them to talk about the long-term goals.
Yeah, if needed. I mean, it may be a flexible thing too, that you may say, get a staff member who says, look, I've been so focused on my weekly goals, I haven't got to the monthly ones. Can we park that for the next meeting? I'm not ready to talk about it yet. Okay.
Okay, I think I've got a lot more clarity about this. Thank you.
I'll send the bill.
Absolutely, you're welcome to do that. Thank you. What is it that you feel is important to this whole notion of performance management, or even sharing something you're passionate about within the overall health of an organization, which is organizational psychology, etc., that you're passionate about, you want to share? I will let you drive whatever the topic is.
Look, I think it comes back to the VUCA times we live in. The fact that we can't separate you mentioned it, the environment earlier, you mentioned that. We can't separate. COVID interfered so much, and climactic changes are interfering so much with our world of work and our organisations that it's fascinating to see how they're going to have to keep flexing, and the world of work is changing so dramatically. The way we work now is completely different to the way, and the expectations of staff is totally different. The fluid careers that we're seeing, where people don't expect to stay in one job for too long, and they want to morph over into that other industry, and they want opportunities. It was very empowering for the worker. I think that we were all very excited as organisational psychologists at first because the worker suddenly had more power. That we called it the psychological contract with the organisation that the worker has. And again, it's the relationship. So they gained much more power during COVID because they were demanding flexibility, work from home, and the organisation could not lose them. So had to go along with a lot of it. There was a lot of pushback. So I'm always fascinated about change and the way the world of work keeps changing. And at the moment, how it's bringing personal and professional lives much more together. That ideally, if you've got an engaged worker, there's someone who personally it is the right fit for them as a person. That's what we're seeing happened more during and since COVID, that people were saying, I can't just work to live now. I need to feel that I'm also living to work a bit more, that I really do love my work more. So that's been a very exciting outcome.
Absolutely. Can I share with you just a nuance from my own? I can't comment on the topic. You're the expert there. I wasn't trying to add value from that point, but I want to share my own experience as an employee, as a matter of fact. CEO is an employee still, yeah? I can't focus on work in the best way possible if something is bothering me. For example, in my case, my son and his well-being. If I'm concerned about my son's well-being, I'm not going to be the best employee possible. If I feel that my dog is unhappy or he hasn't exercised enough, I'm not being a responsible owner. It depends on me 100%. He's sitting in this apartment. I'm the one who makes the decision, take him for a walk. And if unconsciously I feel guilty, I'm not doing enough for my dog, I'm not going to be this best employee. So how is this not just common sense and smart for an organization to recognize that and allow for a win-win situation? Am I on the right track here?
That's nuanced management, and that's all the go now. That's exactly what I should have explained better earlier on. You are identifying where you need to be managed or manage yourself according to all the nuances in your life, not just your work, not just your health, your family, your dog, and everything. There's another really interesting emerging trend of self-compassion being really linked with performance. That people have self-compassion perform a lot better, that it's not a soft, weak thing.
Explain that. People that have self-compassion.
Self-compassion for yourself, that you as a father are suffering. As a dog owner, you're suffering. Having compassion for yourself rather than just railroading through.
Oh, me understanding, me being, oh my God, oh.
That's where you're performing.
Talk to me a bit about that. Not many people understand that. Please elaborate a bit more on that. I know what you mean, but if you can elaborate a little bit more on that. It's so interesting.
Yeah, James Kirby is Australia's guru at the moment, in Dr. James Kirby in self-compassion. He's got a fabulous little book for lay people with coloured dots on the cover. And he's got a more academic one for practitioners that's just been released. And he says self-compassion has been frowned upon as something that's where people are going too soft on themselves. Yeah. But in fact, all the research is showing that people who actually do have the self-compassion, managers who manage with compassion, who give feedback with compassion, get better results, get a better performance.
I'm always someone who advocated as a CEO, when I speak with my shareholders, directors, my employees, colleagues, etc., I've always used the word pragmatic. I always sort of used to say, look, even if you're not a nice person, let's say you're a psychopath, right? As a manager, if you're just pragmatic and smart, you'll realize being nice to your employee is going to give you the best outcome.
Yeah,
you don't have to be a nice person to get it. So do you know what I mean? Like what you're saying, just even common sense. Let alone that we're freaking humans and it would make us happier if we can be that kind of manager anyway.
And also with AI, we've been bleating for decades that soft skills in management is going to be more needed than tech skills.
Right, because AI can do the other stuff.
AI can do it all now. So all of this nuanced soft skills, human factors are booming in requirement.
So you're saying AI will not replace you as an organisational psychologist?
I forget the exact research on that. It's that AI is not inventive. It can't actually be creative enough because it's always using a database that we already know. So it's never one step ahead. So in that way, I will always be one step ahead of AI, I reckon.
As a researcher, on
as
the edge,
human,
inventing.
As a human, your ability to judge time. You don't need AI for that. We've got extraordinary skills as humans, and we're continuing to grow and develop. AI is just following us, using all our data.
I did a 30-minute talk in a conference about AI and how you've got to prepare your organization for that change as it sweeps through. And, oh my God, it kept me up for about 30 days leading to it, trying to get to the bottom of the matter.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, I still stand by that. It comes down to, so the things that will not be replaced, and that's what your employees need to get better at, is have the ability to have a conversation, quality conversation, I call them, with the actual user of your product.
Yeah.
The word user is maybe software related, but the consumer, the actual people that consume your product, whatever it might be, and understanding their requirement.
Yeah.
Not the solution that they perceive they want. Really, really, what is it that they want to do? And is it really what they're telling you the root cause, or are they telling you symptoms? I use this example. I said, I don't know, maybe I swear I didn't read it anywhere, research it, just came my own thing. I said, you look at a leaf, see these people spraying chemicals on a tree because the leaves are dying. They don't look at literally, that's the root cause. It was invented, I'm sure, 1 million years ago by some culture because of that. They were farmers or whatever. And the root cause, what are you pouring down the road, 100 meters down the road, that next door neighbor pouring maybe oil engine on that root and killing the tree, and you're spraying chemicals on the leaves? You think you'll solve the problem? Get into the root cause about why this user, this consumer of your product, doesn't seem to be really happy. What is the reason is the one thing that all your employees need to get better at.
Yeah, and they would always be better at, if they care about their work, than AI.
Yeah.
Because that's a nuanced dialogue between you and the customer.
100%. And the trust that's needed in that for them to open up. Do you think it's easy for someone to ask that client that question? Go, who the hell are you? Why should I tell you this? You just show up just to give me the next invoice and tell me how it's going to be increased. It takes a lot of trust for that client to open up to you at that level, especially when they don't realize that they don't know the root cause yet. You need to work with them on uncovering that, going to the next level of the onion and stuff. It's such a personal space you need to enter. It takes decent amount of people's skills and humanity to get into that space, you know? Yeah. Very interesting. Well, maybe we'll leave it at this. And, it's been really enlightening. Thank you so much. There were so many things that I can now listen to this and read about and educate myself. And you published a book in 2004, was it?
2002.
2002.
Yeah.
What was the book about?
The book is called Life Works, Rediscover Yourself and Transform Your Relationships. So it's not about organisational psychology. Our second book hasn't been published yet.
Okay.
And there's a whole bunch of my podcasts and articles, interviews, all through.
What's the keywords we're looking for to find your stuff? Dr. Amanda Ferguson.
Yeah.
All that should show up.
It'll all show up.
Podcasts, etc. Yep.
Yeah. And look, the book's still in print on demand with HarperCollins. You can still buy it through shops. As I said, the podcasts are all there too.
In your next book, when do you expect it to be published? I want to bring you in when it's just leading to that publishing date. Because it's related to my stuff.
It's related to this. It's goal setting.
Yeah.
It's ambitious goal achievement.
This year, you reckon, calendar year or next year?
Well, let's see. The book is an adventure book, basically. And I tried to publish it in COVID when everyone
What's adventure book? Forgive me, I'm a bit naive.
Ambitious goal achievement is an adventure.
No way.
Oh, it's such an adventure.
I thought that was like a category of books that I haven't heard of.
No, but what I'm getting at is it's a genre
I get it.
that people were knitting, making sourdough bread during COVID. They didn't want to go on an adventure of goal setting. They were retreating. So the publishers all said to me, it's a brilliant book, but the timing's wrong. So I think the timing's right now. So we'll see.
Yeah. Good luck with that. Thank you so much for coming here and talk to us about all this. I learned from it, and I really hope that a lot of people will learn from this. We will get the thing published and send you the link as well. And I'm sure Chris will do a good job to communicate that to all our audience and people. I really appreciate you. Good to meet you, and thank you very much.
A great pleasure, Anna.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.